When Gregory Hamilton walked into the emergency board meeting, he didn't know he was about to choose between his fortune and his conscience. The silver-haired investor had built empires on spreadsheets and silence, but today the janitor pushing a cart past the mahogany doors held the answer no one saw coming. Would he bet everything on the woman no one believed in, or let 40 families lose their homes by Friday?
The conference room smelled like imported leather and desperation. Robert Chen, CEO of Stratton Technologies, stood at the head of the table, his silk tie slightly loosened, in a way that suggested the facade was cracking. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched out in geometric indifference, glass towers catching the late autumn sun. Inside, the air was thick with the kind of tension that comes before terrible decisions. "Cuts," Robert said, the word landing like a judge's gavel. "A full restructuring. We need to reduce costs by at least 40% immediately." The reaction rippled through the 12 board members like a stone thrown into still water. A woman in gold-rimmed glasses leaned forward, her knuckles white against the polished table. "Cuts? That would mean mass layoffs." "Exactly." Robert's voice was calm in the way that people practicing control often sound, measured, deliberate, empty. "I don't want that, but I don't see another way." Gregory Hamilton sat 3 seats down, his tailored charcoal suit pressed to perfection, his face revealing nothing. At 62, he'd learned to keep his reactions internal, to let numbers speak louder than emotions. He'd invested $18 million in Stratton 3 years ago, back when the company was riding high on government contracts and innovation awards. Now those contracts were drying up, competitors were undercutting them, and the quarterly reports read like obituaries. He watched Robert click through slides, red bars descending like falling dominoes, projected losses that made his stomach tighten. 40%. That wasn't trimming fat, that was amputation. "How many people are we talking about?" asked Marcus, the bald man in the red tie, his voice careful. 63 positions, Robert replied, mostly in operations, IT support, and facilities. 63 families, 63 mortgage payments, tuition bills, medical premiums. He'd seen layoffs before, had signed off on them even, but something about the speed, the certainty in Robert's voice felt wrong, like a man who'd already made peace with a decision before exploring the alternatives. "What about cost optimization?" Gregory asked, his first words in 20 minutes. "Process improvements. Have we consulted with department heads about efficiencies?" Robert's smile was thin. "Gregory, we've run the models. Technology upgrades would cost more upfront than we'd save. This is the only viable path forward." The meeting dragged on for another hour, voices rising and falling, proposals floated and dismissed. By the time they adjourned, the vote was set for 2 days out. Gregory gathered his leather portfolio and headed for the elevator, his mind churning. He didn't notice the woman with the cleaning cart until she nearly collided with him in the hallway. "Oh, sorry, sir," she said, stepping aside quickly, her eyes downcast. Gregory glanced at her, late 20s, maybe early 30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, Stratton Facilities stitched onto her navy uniform. Her name badge read Sophie Moreno. She gripped the handle of her cart like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. "No harm done," he said, moving past. But as he waited for the elevator, he caught her reflection in the polished brass doors. She wasn't moving. She was staring at the closed conference room, her expression tight with something that looked like frustration, or maybe recognition. The elevator chimed. Gregory stepped inside. The doors closed on Sophie Moreno and whatever thought had frozen her in place. That night, Gregory sat in his study, a glass of scotch untouched, on the mahogany desk. His wife Eleanor had gone to bed an hour ago, but sleep felt impossible. He pulled up Stratton's financials on his laptop, scrolling through expense reports, vendor contracts, staffing allocations. The numbers didn't lie, but they didn't tell the whole truth either. He saw inefficiencies, duplicate software subscriptions, legacy systems that required manual workarounds, vendor contracts that hadn't been renegotiated in 5 years. None of it catastrophic alone, but together, it was bleeding the company dry in ways that wouldn't show up in Robert's slick presentation. Gregory rubbed his eyes. He wasn't a crusader. He was an investor. His job was to protect his capital, to make rational decisions based on data. Sentiment was expensive. But 63 people. He thought of Sophie Moreno standing in that hallway, staring at the boardroom like she knew something no one had asked her about. He closed the laptop. Rationality could wait until morning.
Sophie Moreno had 2 degrees, one in computer science from a state university she'd attended on scholarship, one in systems engineering from night classes she'd paid for by cleaning offices. No one at Stratton knew that. To them, she was the woman who emptied trash bins, restocked breakroom supplies, and polished the glass doors on the executive floor. She was invisible in the way that people who do essential work often are, noticed only when something goes wrong, a spill that isn't cleaned, or a coffee station that runs out of filters. But Sophie saw everything. She saw the IT department struggling with outdated project management software that crashed twice a week. She saw the operations team manually entering data into 3 different systems because nothing talked to each other. She saw the frustrated emails left open on screens, the post-it notes scrawled with passwords, the workarounds that wasted hours every single day. And 6 months ago, she'd started building something. It began as a side project, lines of code written on her laptop at 2 a.m. after her shift ended, fueled by cold coffee and the quiet stubbornness of someone who'd learned that no one was going to hand her a seat at the table. She built an integrated platform, nothing flashy, just clean architecture that automated repetitive tasks, synced data across departments, flagged inefficiencies in real time. She tested it on a sandbox server she set up herself, refining it, debugging it, imagining a world where she could walk into Robert Chen's office and say, "I have a solution." But she knew how that conversation would go. She'd tried before, 3 years ago, when she'd first started at Stratton. She'd sent an email to her supervisor suggesting a better scheduling system for the facilities team. The response had been polite and dismissive. "Thanks for your input. We'll take it under advisement." Nothing had changed. So, Sophie kept her head down and her code private. Until the night of the board meeting. She'd been cleaning the executive floor when she overheard Robert's presentation through the slightly open conference room door. 40% cuts, 63 people. She felt her stomach drop, her hands tightening on the handle of her cart. She knew half those people. Maria in operations, who brought homemade tamales every Friday. David in IT, who was saving for his daughter's wedding. Lynn in facilities, who carpooled with Sophie and sang off-key to 80s radio. They were good people. They worked hard. And they were about to lose everything because the company couldn't see past its own inefficiency. Sophie made a decision. She finished her shift, clocked out, and went home to her small apartment in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered and the bus ran late. She opened her laptop, pulled up her platform, and ran a final diagnostic. It worked. It would save Stratton millions, not over years, but over months. The question was, how did she make anyone listen? The next morning, Gregory Hamilton arrived at Stratton's headquarters earlier than usual. He'd barely slept, his mind looping through financial models and moral calculations. He wanted to talk to department heads, to see the operations floor for himself, to understand where the waste actually lived before the board voted on Robert's plan. He took the elevator down to the 3rd floor, where the IT and operations teams shared a sprawling open workspace. The morning light filtered through vertical blinds, casting stripes across desks cluttered with monitors, tangled cables, and coffee mugs in various states of abandonment. A young woman looked up as he approached, Keisha, according to her nameplate, a systems analyst with bright purple glasses and a skeptical expression. "Mr. Hamilton," she said, surprised. "Can I help you?" "I'm doing some research before the board vote. I wanted to ask about workflow inefficiencies. Are there processes that could be streamlined with better tools?" Keisha blinked.
You mean like the 3 different ticketing systems we use because none of them integrate, or the fact that we manually reconcile vendor invoices because accounting and procurement don't use compatible software? Gregory pulled out a notepad. Tell me more. For the next 2 hours, he moved through the building, talking to people Robert had never consulted. He learned about the legacy CRM system that required daily manual exports, the scheduling software that double-booked meeting rooms, the inventory tracking that lived in Excel spreadsheets passed around like contraband. Every conversation confirmed what he had suspected. Stratton's problems weren't about headcount. They were about infrastructure. He was on his way back to the executive floor when he saw her again. Sophie Moreno, pushing her cart near the service elevators, her expression distant, preoccupied. On impulse, Gregory stopped. "Excuse me, Sophie, is it?" She looked up, startled. "Yes, sir?" "You work on multiple floors, right? You see a lot of the company in action." "I suppose so." "If you had to identify the biggest operational inefficiency here, what would it be?" Sophie hesitated, her eyes searching his face for sarcasm or condescension. She found neither. "Honestly," she said quietly, "it's that nobody talks to each other. Every department has its own system, its own way of doing things, and nothing connects. So people waste half their day just trying to get information from one place to another." Gregory nodded slowly. "And if you could fix that, what would it look like?" Sophie's pulse quickened. This was the moment, the edge of the cliff. "I'd build a unified platform. Cloud-based, modular, real-time data sync across departments. Automate the repetitive stuff, scheduling, invoicing, reporting, so people can focus on actual problem-solving instead of administrative busywork." Gregory studied her. "That's very specific." "I've thought about it." "Have you ever mentioned this to anyone?" "Once, 3 years ago. No one cared." Gregory was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Would you be willing to show me what you're talking about?" "In detail." Sophie's breath caught. Yes, I have a prototype." "A prototype?" "I built it. On my own time. It's functional." Gregory's eyebrows rose. "You built enterprise software as a side project." "I have a degree in computer science and systems engineering. I know how this company works because I see it every day. I know where the problems are." Gregory extended his hand. "Can you meet me in conference room B in 30 minutes? Sophie shook his hand, her grip firm despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. "I'll be there." And for the first time in months, she let herself hope. Conference room B was smaller than the boardroom, tucked into a corner of the 6th floor with a view of the parking lot instead of the skyline. Sophie arrived 5 minutes early, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, her heart hammering. Gregory was already there, seated at the oval table with his notepad and a cup of coffee. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Show me what you've built." Sophie sat up quickly, connecting her laptop to the room's display screen. Her hands were steady now. This was her territory, the place where doubt dissolved into logic and code. The interface appeared on the screen, clean, intuitive, organized into modules. "This is the dashboard," Sophie began. "It aggregates data from every department, operations, IT, accounting, HR, facilities, and displays it in real time. No more manual entry, no more duplicate records. If someone in operations updates a project timeline, IT sees it instantly. If accounting processes an invoice, procurement gets an automatic notification." She clicked through screens, demonstrating automated reporting, predictive analytics for resource allocation, flagged redundancies in vendor spending. The platform also learns. It identifies patterns, like if a certain vendor consistently delivers late, or if a process bottleneck happens every Thursday at 2 p.m. It surfaces those insights so managers can make informed decisions. Gregory leaned forward, his eyes on the screen. "How long did this take you to build?" 6 months, working nights and weekends." "And it's operational, not theoretical?" "I tested it on a private server. It's functional. It would need to be customized for Stratton's exact specifications and integrated with existing systems, but the core architecture is solid." Gregory sat back, processing. "Do you have any idea what this could mean for the company?" Sophie's voice was quiet. I know it could save a lot of jobs. Gregory's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a reminder about the board vote now less than 48 hours away. He looked at Sophie. I need to show this to Robert Chen and the board. Are you prepared for that? Sophie swallowed. What if they don't listen? Then I'll make them listen, but I need your permission to present this on your behalf. Sophie thought of Maria, David, Lynn. She thought of every person whose name would end up on a severance list if Robert's plan went through. You have my permission, she said. Gregory stood. We're going upstairs, right now. Robert Chen did not appreciate interruptions. When Gregory walked into his office unannounced, the CEO's expression shifted from surprise to irritation in the span of a heartbeat. Gregory, I'm in the middle of... You need to see this, Gregory said, gesturing for Sophie to enter behind him. Robert's eyes flicked to Sophie, then back to Gregory. Is there a problem with facilities? No, there's a solution to the company's financial crisis, and she built it. Robert's confusion was palpable. I'm sorry, what? Sophie stepped forward, her laptop already open. Mr. Chen, my name is Sophie Moreno. I work in facilities, but I also have degrees in computer science and systems engineering. I've developed a software platform that can reduce Stratton's operational costs by over 40% without layoffs. For a moment, Robert just stared. Then he laughed, short, incredulous. You work in cleaning? I do, Sophie said, her voice steady. But that's not what matters. What matters is that I created a tool that can save this company. Gregory, Robert said, turning to the investor. This is absurd. We have a vote in 2 days. We don't have time for... Watch the demo. 5 minutes. If it's not viable, we walk away. Robert's jaw tightened, but he gestured to the monitor on his desk. Fine, 5 minutes. Sophie connected her laptop, and she showed him everything. Robert watched in silence. His expression shifted, skepticism giving way to focus sharpening into something that looked almost like respect. When the demo ended, he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. This is impressive, but implementing something like this company-wide would take months. We don't have months. It would take 3 weeks, Sophie said. I've already mapped the integration points. I can have a pilot running in operations within 72 hours. And if it fails? Then you proceed with your original plan. But if it works, you save 63 jobs and millions of dollars. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and dialed an extension. James, clear my afternoon. I need the department heads in conference room A in 1 hour. He hung up and looked at Sophie. You're going to present this to the leadership team. If they buy in, we'll test it. If it works, we'll revisit the board vote. Sophie felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Robert said. You're about to defend this in front of people who've been doing their jobs for 20 years. If you can't convince them, this goes nowhere. Gregory placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder. She'll convince them. And in that moment, Sophie believed it too. The department heads filled conference room A with the wary energy of people who'd been pulled from important work for an unspecified emergency. James Keller, VP of Operations, arrived first. A broad-shouldered man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and the posture of someone who'd spent years managing crises. He nodded at Robert, then glanced at Sophie with polite confusion. Is this about the board vote? He asked. In a way, Robert said. The others filed in. Nadine from accounting, Marcus from IT, Priya from HR, Alan from procurement. They took seats around the long table, exchanging glances that asked the question no one voiced. Why is the janitor here? Robert stood at the head of the table. Thank you for coming on short notice. I want to introduce Sophie Moreno. She has a proposal that could change the trajectory of this company. I need you to listen with open minds. Sophie rose, her laptop connected to the display screen, her notes organized in a way that felt like armor. She began. She walked them through the platform, its architecture, its integration points, its projected impact. She showed them dashboards tailored to their specific departments. She demonstrated how operations could track projects in real time, how accounting could automate invoice reconciliation, how IT could eliminate redundant tickets. She spoke clearly, confidently, answering technical questions with precision. but she could feel the resistance, subtle, unspoken, heavy as humidity. When she finished, James Keller was the first to speak. "This is ambitious, but I have to ask, why should we trust a system built by someone with no experience managing enterprise infrastructure?" Sophie met his gaze. "Because I didn't build it in a vacuum. I studied this company for 3 years. I know your workflows, your pain points, your workarounds. I built this platform because I understand Stratton in ways that outside consultants never will." "And if it breaks?" Nadine asked, her tone sharp. "If it crashes mid-quarter and we lose critical data?" "It won't," Sophie said. "I've run stress tests, I've built in redundancies, and I'll be here overseeing every step of the implementation." "You'll be here?" Marcus from IT raised an eyebrow. "You have a full-time job in facilities." "Then I'll work both," Sophie said simply. "Whatever it takes." Priya from HR leaned forward, her expression softer. "Sophie, I believe you're talented, but this is a massive risk. If we delay the board vote and this doesn't work, we'll be in an even worse position." "And if we don't try?" Sophie said quietly. 63 people lose their jobs. People who are good at what they do. People who deserve a chance. The room fell silent. Gregory, who'd been standing near the window, spoke for the first time. "I've reviewed the platform. It's sound. More than that, it's exactly what Stratton needs. I'm willing to back this financially. If the pilot fails, I'll personally cover the costs of the expedited layoff plan." James looked at him. "You're betting your own money on this?" "I am," Gregory said, "because I believe in what Sophie's built, and because I think we owe it to this company to try." Robert, who'd been watching the room carefully, finally spoke. "I'm authorizing a 3-week pilot. Operations and IT will implement the platform in phases. If we see measurable improvement in efficiency and cost reduction within that time frame, we cancel the layoffs and proceed with full integration. If not, we execute the original restructuring plan." He looked at Sophie. "You have 3 weeks. Don't waste them." Sophie nodded, her throat tight. "I won't." The meeting adjourned. As people filed out, James Keller approached Sophie, his expression unreadable. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said. "I do too," Sophie replied. He almost smiled. "Let's make it work then." The next 72 hours were a blur. Sophie moved through Stratton like a ghost with a mission, training staff, troubleshooting integrations, rewriting code on the fly when systems didn't talk the way she'd anticipated. She slept 3 hours a night, lived on vending machine coffee and protein bars, and fielded 100 questions a day from skeptical employees who couldn't believe the janitor was suddenly running their software. But slowly, the platform took hold. Operations reported a 35% reduction in project turnaround time. Accounting closed the monthly books in half the usual time. IT saw ticket volume drop by 40% as automated solutions handled routine issues. By the end of the second week, the numbers were undeniable. Gregory watched from the sidelines, attending daily progress meetings, asking questions, offering quiet support. He saw Sophie's exhaustion, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly when she presented updates. And he saw something else. A company waking up. Employees who'd been bracing for layoffs started smiling again, collaboration improved, morale, that intangible thing that couldn't be quantified on a spreadsheet, began to return. On the 18th day, Robert called an emergency board meeting. The same room, the same leather chairs, but the energy was different. Robert stood at the head of the table, a tablet in his hands displaying real-time analytics. 3 weeks ago, I proposed a 40% workforce reduction. Today, I'm recommending we cancel that plan. The murmurs were immediate. Sophie Moreno, a member of our facilities team, developed a software platform that has reduced operational costs by 43%. Productivity is up 35%. Employee retention is stable. We are profitable again. He gestured to the screen where graphs showed the transformation in clean, irrefutable lines. I'm proposing we not only adopt this platform company-wide, but that we promote Sophie to a leadership position to oversee its continued development and integration. The room erupted in questions, but Gregory was already smiling. The vote was unanimous.
Sophie stood in her new office on the 12th floor, a small room with a window overlooking the city and a glass desk that caught the morning light. It still didn't feel real. She'd been given the title of Director of Systems Innovation, a position created specifically for her, with a salary that made her cry when she saw the offer letter. But more than that, she had a voice. When she walked into meetings now, people listened. When she suggested improvements, they were implemented. When she advocated for her team, the company responded. It was dizzying and terrifying and wonderful. Gregory stopped by her office on her third day in the new role, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing her one. Sophie accepted it gratefully. "Thank you. For everything. I don't think I've said that enough." "You earned this," Gregory said. "I just opened the door. You walked through it." They stood by the window looking out at the city. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie said. "Why did you believe me? You didn't know me. You had no reason to trust that I could pull this off." Gregory was quiet for a moment. "I believed you because you cared. Not about profit margins or quarterly reports. You cared about people. About Maria and David and Lynn. That kind of conviction is rare, and in my experience, it's usually worth betting on." Sophie smiled. "I'm glad you did." "So am I." A knock at the door interrupted them. James Keller stepped in, holding a file folder. "Sophie, sorry to interrupt. I wanted to go over the Q2 integration timeline with you when you have a minute." "Of course. I'll be right there." James nodded and left. Gregory raised his coffee cup in a small toast. "To new beginnings." Sophie clinked her cup against his. "To second chances." 6 months later, Stratton Technologies was featured in a business journal as a model of innovation and employee-centered transformation. The article highlighted Sophie's platform, Gregory's investment in human capital, and Robert's willingness to pivot when presented with a better solution. But the real story wasn't in the headlines. It was in the operations floor, where Maria still brought tamales on Fridays and invited Sophie to join the team lunches. It was in IT where Marcus mentioned Sophie in his department newsletter as the person who saved us from drowning in tickets. It was in the facilities break room where Lynn kept a printout of Sophie's promotion announcement taped to the fridge, circled in red marker with the words, "One of us made it." Sophie still visited that break room, still had coffee with her former coworkers, still remembered what it felt like to be invisible. And she made sure no one else at Stratton ever felt that way again. One evening, as she was packing up to leave, Gregory stopped by her office one last time. "I'm stepping back from the board," he said. "Eleanor and I are moving to the coast. Time to enjoy retirement properly." Sophie felt a pang of sadness. "I'll miss having you around." "You don't need me anymore," Gregory said kindly. "You never really did. But I'm glad I was here to see this." He handed her a small, wrapped box. Sophie opened it, a silver keychain in the shape of a circuit board, engraved with a single word, "Visible." Her eyes stung. "Thank you." "Keep building, Sophie. The world needs more people like you." He left, and Sophie sat alone in her office, holding the keychain, watching the city lights blink on one by one against the twilight. She thought about the board meeting where she'd almost stayed silent, the hallway where Gregory had asked her a question no one else thought to ask, the 63 people who still had jobs because someone had been willing to see her. And she made a promise to herself that she would spend the rest of her career making sure that brilliance, no matter where it lived, no matter who carried it, would always have a chance to be heard. Outside, the city hummed with a million invisible stories. Sophie turned on her desk lamp and got back to work.